I'm Dianne Harris. I'm the principal investigator for the Humanities Without Walls Project and director of the Illinois Program for Research in the Humanities at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's absolutely fantastic to see you all here. This is really an exciting moment because it's the first where we can actually see the consortium literally coming to life here in this room. Thank you so much to everyone for traveling to join us here for what I hope will be an intellectually energizing day and a half together. Before I do anything else, I want to offer some words of thanks. This consortium, as you can imagine, is the result of more than 3 years of work, and it's the result of many minds and many hands at work. First, of course, my profound thanks to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation for the funding that has made possible the creation of the Humanities Without Walls Consortium. Second, I want to thank the superb Humanities Without Walls staff. Jason Merrick, who is right in the back. Jason, can you all turn around and look at him? That man is amazing. Thank you, Jason. Jason is the excellent project manager for this project, and he's the person who's really kept everything running. Kelly Delahanty, who is over on the side there. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly is our communications coordinator. She helped get this fancy website going and keeps the flow of communication going. Derek Fox, who is our research assistant. Paula Balkin-Williams and Susie Harmon, who are not here. They're our grants coordinator and business manager, and they help keep the money flowing. And they've all done an outstanding job running what is a quite complex machine, and they are really, really nice people. So I'm very, very grateful to be working with them on this. I also want to thank the staff at the Chicago Humanities Festival offices who are working with us on the Predoctoral Summer Workshop Initiative, simply to acknowledge that they're doing already a superb job working with us, and to encourage you all to make sure your graduate students are aware of that project. You can find out more about it online at the Humanities Without Walls website. And another key partner for us is the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at UIUC. They're helping us make accessible online as much of the HWW work as possible. So I want to extend special thanks to their Dean, Alan Rainier, and to their Associate Dean, Stephen Downey. I also want to thank Janelle Weatherford, who helped me write the grant and who dealt with the very complex budget. But my sincerest thanks right now go to my colleagues and partners who've helped to build this consortium on the 14 other campuses, and I want to name them all. Michael Barobay, Jim Chandler, Yunyi Cho, Jonathan Elmer, Jennifer Gunn, Sarah Geyer, Susan Levine, Rick Livingston, Teresa Mangum, Paul Ryder, Maura Ryan, David Prestel, Sydney Smith, Susanna Smith, Wendy Wall, Kay Walter, and Ann Waltner. They've been outstanding collaborators, and the initiatives we've developed for the consortium resulted from the work of their brilliant creative minds. They and their Humanities Center or Institute staffs are also doing the administrative work on your respective campuses to make sure the funding and the information flows. And this is no small task, and I'm truly grateful to them. I consider myself very, very fortunate to be working with them, and I'd like us to ask those who are here with us tonight to please stand for a moment so we can thank them together and so you can see who they are. So please stand, and thank you. These are great folks who are working behind the scenes on your campuses every day to keep the work of the humanities going in this country. I also want to gratefully acknowledge some people who are not here, some colleagues who run the New York Humanities Corridor at Syracuse University. That may seem surprising, but I want to thank Greg Lambert, Kelly Picard, and Mai Dittmar. They're the only other similar humanities consortium, also funded by the Mellon Foundation, the New York State Humanities Corridor, and we've come to see them as close working partners on our project. They've been incredibly generous, sharing information with us and sharing their experiences that they've gathered about how to make a complicated consortial project run smoothly. They've really exemplified the kind of cross-institutional generosity that this project is based in. And I also, of course, want to thank the staff here at the Gratz Center for welcoming us to this beautiful space. Now, as you're all aware, we're here to work together over the next day or so to think about the intellectual and creative challenges posed by this wonderfully broad rubric, the Global Midwest. But in light of recent events that have taken place on my own campus, I want and need to say a few words about academic freedom and about the relationship of the Humanities Without Walls Consortium to my own campus. I've already been in touch with some of you about these questions, and I want to take just a few minutes tonight to make clear a few points. First, I want to make clear that neither I personally and as a faculty member, that I personally as a faculty member do not support the actions taken recently by our Chancellor, President, and Board of Trustees members. I remain deeply concerned about the apparent violations of shared governance and academic freedom that have taken place over the past weeks, and I stand with my colleagues on our campus and at other campuses in their opposition to these events, and have publicly stated that opposition in open letters that have circulated rather widely now. I sincerely hope that we can find a productive way forward, one that will help all scholars and students across the nation at public and private universities to maintain the rights to academic freedom and shared governance that are the bedrock of healthy universities and are at the very heart of what we do in the humanities and the arts. Let me also be clear about another point. Humanities Without Walls is administered by me as its principal investigator and by the staff who are hired to work on it, and by the Humanities Center and Institute directors and staffs on your own university campuses. It is a large, complex, and collective administrative effort. I want to clarify again that the Humanities Without Walls Consortium is funded by a grant from the Mellon Foundation. That foundation does not permit overhead costs or indirect recovery costs, so the University of Illinois receives no profit or funding from this grant. To the contrary, the grant costs the university money because they've had to contribute funds to pay for some of the staffing of the grant, and I'm grateful for that funding that our campus has contributed because it's permitted us to hire some of the staff we needed to make this run, and of course it allows me to give my time to go toward running this project. In all matters related to the Humanities Without Walls, I report directly to the Mellon Foundation and not to any administrators on the UIUC campus. I want to be especially clear about these points because I know that some of you have been concerned about boycotts. If you have further concerns that I've not yet addressed here tonight, I encourage you to please contact me and/or Jason Merrick directly. We'll be more than happy to answer any remaining questions or concerns you might have about this or any other matter related to the consortium. One of the advantages this consortium offers is the opportunity and the structure to work together on emerging issues, even those not explicitly articulated in the two funding initiatives. For example, last spring, when proposals once again threatened the already small NEH budget, the 14 Humanities Center directors and I quickly composed a letter that we sent to our respective state representatives urging the maintenance of the NEH budget. The letter went out with our 15 signatures on it to 33 representatives and within about 36 hours of our first communication about this. So we have a potentially powerful voice when we work together. And I want to encourage us to consider how we might do so as we move through this period of threats to academic freedom that are now happening nationwide. Academic freedom is, it seems to me, a global Midwest issue. And we've been encouraged by one of the Mellon program officers in recent days to think about how we might work together as a consortium to advance a set of conversations on academic freedom and all of the complexities now emerging around that topic. I'll be in conversation with my colleagues across the 15 campuses in the days and weeks ahead about this, and I encourage all of you to do so as well. But tonight and tomorrow, we devote our time to considering what it means to think about the global Midwest, what it means to collaborate in the humanities, something we don't often do, to work together in teams to formulate proposals, and to think about possible new modes of producing and publishing work that results from these projects. I am not a Midwesterner by birth. I was born in California and lived there for most of my life until I moved to Illinois in 1996. And as a longtime former resident of the San Francisco Bay Area, I struggled for years after moving to Illinois to figure out which direction was north. No more mountains on the east, bay on the west to guide me. And for years, the sky just seemed too big, too big. The distance between campus buildings too vast, the landscape too flat. As a spatial thinker, I'm an architectural and urban historian, I had problems adjusting to the new scale of my environment. But I've now come to consider the Midwest differently. And if its landscape still sometimes seems strange to me, it also fascinates. I've grown to value its more subtle and sometimes harsh beauty, but I've also increasingly marveled at the cultural and historical complexity of this space people call the Midwest, wondering how it could be the middle of nowhere, or simply filler space, flyover states to locations on the East Coast, when this large geographical region is filled with top scholars doing incredibly important and innovative work, intellectual work, when it has so much to tell us, among many other things, about global economies, immigration, political and cultural formations, and what my colleague Jody Bird has called, in the context of American Indian studies, transits of empire. Tonight, we'll hear from a few speakers who can help us frame just a few of the key issues we may end up considering. Tomorrow morning, we'll hear from a panel of scholars and artists who can help us think about what it means to collaborate from a range of perspectives, something we're not all that accustomed to doing in the humanities. And after taking time for working sessions in the afternoon, we'll hear about some exciting possibilities that we're formulating that might help you get your work out to a wider audience. Once again, I welcome you. I sincerely thank you for being here and for joining with us in what promises to be a grand and, I believe, an important experiment in advancing research in the humanities and arts. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Angel Ysaguirre, who was recently named the executive director of the Illinois Humanities Council, a very big consortium leader in a way, since it's a network of 56 state councils created by the NEH to disseminate public humanities programs across the states and the US territories. Angel served as the deputy commissioner of the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, the director of global community investing at the Boeing Company, and as a program officer at the McCormick Foundation. Before returning to the Illinois Humanities Council as its executive director, he had served as its director of programs from 1999 to 2005. At that time, he created programs that include the Odyssey Project, Einstein's Revolutions, and Brown v. Board 50 years later, Conversations on Race, Integration, and the Law. He served on the boards of the Donors Forum of Illinois, Theater Communications Group, ICE, International Contemporary Ensemble, the Illinois Center for the Book, Blair Thomas and Company, and the Next Theater. He received his BA in English from Stetson University and his MA in Southern Studies at the University of Mississippi. Please help me welcome Angel Ysaguirre.
Good evening. I don't have any overhead projectors or projections, which makes me feel a little insecure, but I'm going to deal with it. So thanks to Dianne and to all of you for having me here today. It's really great to be in touch with the scholars who are doing such interesting research in the region. I've been at the Humanities Council now for about 6 months as the executive director. I left the council 9 years ago and came back, like I said, 6 months ago. One of my colleagues, Matt Meacham, I think is in the room somewhere. Where's Matt? Stand up, Matt. Matt is a really key member of our staff. He's one of the people, the primary person who makes sure that our work isn't solely focused on Chicago, but gets around the state. And I'll actually talk about some work that he's been influential about. So when Dianne asked me to talk to you today, I wasn't quite sure what I had to say to you, since we're not really a research institution and we're not really collaborating with any of you on Humanities Without Walls projects, but what the heck. So I thought I would do a commercial for the IHC. But I want to do a commercial for the IHC and for state humanities councils with a very specific thing in mind, which is to suggest ways in which the academy and places like state humanities councils, so places that do the public humanities might be able to work together as we try to achieve what are sometimes separate and sometimes similar goals. So, I know that a big part of the Humanities Without Walls project is about preparing predoctoral students for work outside the academy. And I think that this is something that places like state humanities councils can do really, really well, but I think in ways that actually are broader than what academics might have in mind at first. When I heard that part of the work of this consortium was to sort of open up the work to doctoral students, and that the public humanities was one of the primary ways of thinking about doing that, I sort of scratched my head a little because I think there are fewer jobs in the public humanities than there are in the academy. So I'm not sure exactly how wide that's opening it for students, but I think there's actually a ton of possibility, and I'll talk about those possibilities in a bit. Say that there's this very peculiar puzzle in the State Humanities Council world. Dianne mentioned that there are 56 state humanities councils. We were created in the early to mid 70s by the National Endowment for the Humanities, about 6 or 7 years after the NEH and the NEA were founded. And this relationship between the academy and the public humanities, whatever that means, has been it's not a tricky one because I think we get along really well, but what the aim of our work is, I think, has been a really tricky one for state humanities councils. And oftentimes my colleagues look to academics and scholars for ideas and direction. And so far, I don't think that we've figured it out, but I'll talk about how at the Humanities Council we've been trying to figure it out. So the NEH was created really out of the academy. For those who don't know, it was really created by Phi Beta Kappa, the Council of Graduate Studies, and American Council of Learned Societies. So the creation of the founding legislation and the idea of what the NEH would be really came out of thinking that those three organizations did. And you can see the influence of the academy in what the NEH, how the NEH was conceived and what it became and the way that it operates, and then the kind of influence it's had on state humanities councils. I'll say that we represent about a third of the budget of the NEH, and it's a percentage that Congress decides, and it is by far the most popular thing that the NEH does among Congress. And it is because it's state-controlled money, and the Republicans don't always love federal control, and they prefer state control. So the state humanities councils hold a really, I think, valued place within the world of the NEH, but I don't think that we've done a really great job of thinking about what it is that we should be, or even what it is that we actually are. So when I came to the Illinois Humanities Council, following a leader who had been the executive director for 20 years. She's someone who hired me and who was my boss for 6 years, but who worked at the Illinois Humanities Council for 35 of the council's 40 years. And so then, I came along and figured, heck, I can do things differently. And so, along with our staff and board, have been thinking about what it is that we want to be and how we shape ourselves as a result. And I went back to the founding legislation for the National Endowment for the Humanities, so sort of our parenting. And I was really interested to read the proclamations about why the NEH and the NEA were founded. The first thing that the legislation says, I think, is the most profound thing, although none of you will nod your heads about it, which is that democracy demands wisdom and vision. It's not the kind of thing that I think politicians think all that often, although I'm sure people would be quick to agree. And in the piece of the legislation where they talked about Democracy Demanding Wisdom and Vision, it talks about the importance of having access to the arts and humanities for all people across the United States. So there's this idea that for us to be a strong democratic society, we would have to be smart people and we would have to have imagination. But also, all people should have access to the humanities so that we can all act smartly and with imagination. The NEH, according to the founding legislation, was supposed to encourage and support national progress and scholarship. We're supposed to make widely available the greatest achievement of art and ideas across the country, foster mutual respect and diverse beliefs and value of all persons and groups, that the arts and humanities belong to everyone, that the most compelling and I think that the most compelling statement of all of those, of course, is that democracy demands wisdom and vision. About 5 years after the founding of the NEH, Congress decided that the NEH was not doing a very good job of ensuring that all people had access to the humanities, that what the NEH was funding in those first 5 years was purely academic research. And so the goal about encouraging and supporting scholarship was very strong, but the part about serving all people wasn't quite so strong. And so they created this network of 56 state councils to try to make that access a bit more available to folks. But I think the idea of democracy demanding wisdom and vision is something that we've never, as state humanities councils, ever really figured out how to do, or even really what the cause is between what we do and how democracy is strengthened as a result of our work. And a few years ago, I was with an executive director of one of the state humanities councils who said, if people don't understand the relationship between what we do and democracy, then they'll never get it. And so she was saying, you know, as someone that fundraises, if someone doesn't get it right away, then I don't bother wasting my time. And I really disagree with that statement, partly because I think if we don't interrogate the relationship between what we do and a stronger democracy, then chances are we're not actually doing anything that leads to a stronger democracy. So I was when I came back to the Illinois Humanities Council, I was actually really interested in this relationship between the work that we do and having a stronger democracy. You probably saw the Pew Center research that came out about 6 months ago that suggested that since 10 years ago, more Americans prefer to live in ideological isolation from each other, and that our idea about the negative effects of people who disagree with us has shifted away from our belief that people who disagree with us might actually be just as smart as we are, to believing that people who disagree with us are actually dangerous. And so as we increasingly believe that folks who disagree with us are actually dangerous, we more frequently don't want to live in a space near them or with them, and of course, see the opposite of value in what they might bring to a conversation. And that is a very, very troubling thing to me, that, I'm sure we all agree that we're not always the smartest person in the room, and that sometimes people we disagree with might actually have something to teach us that we haven't known before. So at the Humanities Council, as I arrived, and I was trying to think about what this relationship was between our work and democracy, and how we might shape our work so that we could articulate this relationship or causality in a more specific way. I tried to think about what the pillars of democracy were, and then thought about which ones were actually most relevant to our work, or which ones actually our work could be most relevant towards, and settled on a few things that I thought that the IHC and other state humanities councils might actually be able to have a measurable impact on. The first one is public policy. Public policy affects us in greater numbers, obviously, than any other kind of changes that get created. The second is media and journalism, that the way that information gets circulated, and the veracity of that information has a huge impact on the way that we see the world and how we vote and how we become politically active and many other things. The third is business. You know, most jobs in this country are provided by corporations, but even more than that, the practices of corporations impact our quality of life and the quality of the earth that we live in the most profound ways. If McDonald's were to source organic tomatoes for its salads, it would completely transform agriculture in America. So the impact of corporate America is gigantic. And art, and I believe that art is the sort of, in a way, the most critical of society, but also provides that criticism in a way that people are most willing to hear it. So those are the 4 areas that we decided that we would focus on in trying to make society smarter and have more vision. And then because access is such a huge part of what the NEH is supposed to provide, we have this 5th focus on access, which actually runs through all of our programming, and that's the part that Matt really thinks most deeply about, or more deeper than anybody else on our staff. And what we did for these 5 areas, or what we're in the middle of doing, is actually to create goals that we believe we can track whether or not it's actually happening. We might have to do evaluation that's different than what we're accustomed to, but I think that we will actually know if it's happening. So just to give a couple of examples, our goal for our art program is to improve the conditions under which art thrives. So very simple. For media and journalism, it's to empower the public to substantively reshape the media conversation and to take informed action by bringing journalists, community members, and scholars together to engage in sustained collaborative inquiry into critical issues facing their communities. But basically, empower the public to reshape the media conversation. And in public policy, our short-term goal is really participation among Illinoisans in productive discussion and debate about public policy in the near term, especially about education reform. To do this work effectively, I believe that, and my staff believes, that we actually have to work very differently than we've worked in the past. In the past, what we've tried to do is to have a program that we think is fascinating and important, and to get as many people to come to that program as possible. But I feel like we have to be more intentional and a bit more sophisticated than that going forward. And so the work that we'll be doing will include sort of smaller group targeted work, and then some of that sort of larger group work as well. And as we've been playing around with program ideas, one of the things that we've learned is that the expertise that scholars can offer is extremely important. I don't believe that the academy is the only place where knowledge gets generated. Knowledge actually gets generated in a number of places. But that humanists are trained to make and understand argument and to think a lot about context, especially context over time. And I feel that as we organize programming, especially programming that deals with things like public policy, I feel like the kind of discipline that humanist scholars bring and have is incredibly useful to us, and actually, I think actually singular. I haven't run into very many other kinds of folks who can provide that kind of discipline. And so I think that the work of scholars is going to continue to be really key to the work that we do. Which brings me back to this thought of the consortium preparing doctoral students for work outside, for possible work outside of the academy. And again, I think that if the extent of that work in a place like Chicago, for example, is for folks to go work at the Chicago Humanities Festival or the Illinois Humanities Council, that the expansion of the world for jobs is actually not going to be that huge. But as I think about the work that my staff and I are going to be doing, I think that there are actually a lot of opportunities to think about the value that humanists bring, or that humanist scholars bring. I'm hoping that the IHC might actually work with a consortium to get a fellow who will work on our public education reform work. And I think that the kind of research that that person will bring and the kind of thinking that they'll help us do on the staff will actually make them a very attractive candidate to a host of nonprofit organizations that are doing work in education reform. When I was at Boeing, over half of the money that we gave at Boeing, our grant-making budget was $141 million a year. Over half of that went to education reform, and almost all of that work being done by nonprofit organizations. So there's this huge world out there that requires research and analytical skills, and by having humanists, I think, help us think about what information do we need to do really smart programming and to shape the kinds of conversations that will make people more engaged in public policy. I think that kind of experience for graduate students will open the world of possibilities for them in terms of the work that they can do going forward. In thinking about the work that the Humanities Council does on the global Midwest, I wanted to just quickly run through the grants that we've made in the past 5 years. Part of what the Humanities Council does is grant making, and that connect the Midwest in some ways to the international community. And in the past 5 years, I think about 60% of the grants that we've made that are global in scope came from Chicago, but about 40% of them actually came from smaller towns around Illinois, towns that are much closer to universities than they are to us. And so projects that could probably use the work of scholars at the universities in Illinois, but I'm sure this is also transferable to Michigan and Wisconsin and Indiana and Pennsylvania and other states that are involved in this collaboration. But as I looked at those grants over the past 5 years, the biggest sort of grouping was on immigration. Lots of stuff on tracing the impact of the Irish in the Midwest as a result of immigration, the impact that Mexicans have had on the Midwest as a result of immigration, Polish women, Korean women, Southeast Asians, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of community-based organizations, cultural institutions, who are looking at the impact of immigration, and I think doing so without the kind of complexity and depth that humanities scholars could offer, although I think doing a fantastic job. Sort of the cultural influences on our communities, both historic and present day. So grants that try to bring Mexican authors to Illinois to meet with Chicano authors, to talk about how scholarship and art is still sort of flowing, the influences are still flowing between the US and Mexico, looking at how the arts provide a space to bridge cultural divides. There was one grant that specifically looked at the roles of dancers and choreographers in doing this. The legacy of Buddhist art from Kashmir and how we still see that influencing art today. Another theme was really the influence of historical moments. There was a grant on the Mirabella sisters and how we saw, and using Julia Alvarez's novel, In the Time of the Butterflies, to really study what the Mirabella sisters, their brand of defiance at the time. Looked at forced migrations from Lithuania, of Lithuanians across the USSR after World War II, more generally the migration of Eastern Europeans across Europe after World War II, and then most recently, the reconstruction efforts in Haiti since the 2010 earthquake. And then finally, a celebration of culture. This is something we saw, I think, mostly in small towns around Illinois. So Mexican popular art and how how that might be more appreciated in certain communities around Illinois, how Puerto Rican art might be more appreciated around Illinois. So again, these are projects that for the most part, small cultural institutions are taking on with very, very few resources. IHC grants are not very big, and we're often the only funder of these projects. And I think that there are lots of similarities between the kinds of projects that you're working in or working on and the kinds of interests that cultural leaders around the state in both small towns and larger cities have. So I think the scholars can really shape the conversations that these organizations have. I think that they can actually really shape the work of state humanities councils. State humanities councils notoriously want to do everything that they think is a good idea, which is to say that they're highly influenceable. Is that a word? And I think that again, the kind of discipline that humanist scholars can bring would be a huge benefit to places like the Illinois Humanities Council and our colleagues at other state councils. I want to end by talking about the way in which I think that engagement with the public can actually serve the academy as well. Danielle Allen, some of you probably know her. I met Danielle a long time ago when she was on faculty at the University of Chicago and then eventually became Dean of the Humanities and is now at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. But she's remained a really close friend of the IHC. Danielle worked with me to start the Odyssey Project, and the Odyssey Project is a 9-month intensive course, college course in the humanities for people who live at or below 150% of the poverty level. For those of you who don't know what that is, what the poverty level is, it means 150% of the poverty level is $23,000 a year for a family of 4. So basically we're offering college level courses to people who live in a household with income of $23,000 or less for a family of 4. These are folks who have a lot of challenges. They can't afford bus fare. They tend to have children that they can't afford childcare for, and these are some of the barriers that have prevented them from going to college, but they understand the value of a college education, and so they very badly want to participate in something like the Odyssey Project. When we set out to create the Odyssey Project, we decided we're not going to try to be smarter than everyone else about what the curriculum should be. Instead, we're going to think about what the core humanistic disciplines are, and we're going to try to provide the same kind of education for these folks that the wealthiest of Americans have. And so we went to the University of Chicago and Northwestern University and said to the faculty, we want to do this. We don't really have any money right now, but I'm sure we'll have money in time. Might you want to participate? And amazingly, both universities sort of signed on the dotted line right away. And now the Odyssey Project exists in 4 different communities, 3 of them in Chicago, 1 on the south side, 1 on the north side, 1 on the near west side, and 1 in Champaign, thanks to our collaboration with Dianne and other folks at University of Illinois. And we graduate about 20 students a year from each of these sites. We have a second-year course in Chicago because we discovered that lots of people who came to the Odyssey Project want to go on to college. And so in the second year, we decided that we would do something that was closer to night school. And so we do 1 class a week at night that's 3 hours long, something that our population would likely be able to do more so than the more traditional way of participating in higher education. The courses that students take are in moral philosophy, for the classes taught in English, U.S. history for a class that's taught in Spanish, Latin American history, art, and literature. And then we have a 5th course, which is a critical thinking and writing course. And we decided that for the U.S. history class, we would have students study documents, not historiography. And one of the documents that we decided to teach was the Declaration of Independence. We thought it was good to teach the Declaration of Independence because it's a really important document, but it's also super short. And for folks who are really busy, they might actually be able to have time to complete their homework assignment if we chose texts that weren't quite so long. And about 4 months ago, Danielle came out with a new book called Our Independence, which is her reading of the Declaration of Independence. But it's her reading of the Declaration of Independence as mediated by this night school course that she taught. And she was teaching the Declaration of Independence at the University of Chicago while she was teaching it to students in the Odyssey Project. And what she learned about the Declaration of Independence in the Odyssey Project was brand new. What she was learning from students at the University of Chicago was very, very different. But one of the things that she realized is that poor African Americans, at least the ones who were coming to our classes, didn't believe that the Declaration of Independence had anything to do with them. And as she read the document sort of through their eyes, her reading about about equality in the Declaration of Independence really changed. And if you've not read her book, her thesis is basically that that in the way that we've implemented the Declaration of Independence over the past few decades, we've put a lot more emphasis on freedom than on equality, and that our society looks very different than it would have if we were to put equal weight on the two. And, I think that, Danielle is a brilliant scholar, of course, but without teaching in the Odyssey Project, she would never have written this book, and she would never have the kind of scholarship that she has. And I believe that engagement in the public humanities in a really deep level can actually change the quality of scholarship that academics do, and engagement with places like the State Humanities Council is a way of doing that. So I hope to get to know more of you and hope to continue partnerships as time goes on. And as we focus our work more intensely, I think it'll give us a sense of the kinds of folks in the Academy that we could work with. So thank you very much for your time and for inviting me here today.